The medical bay aboard the Galactic Council rescue vessel Harmony's light hummed with quiet efficiency. Dr. Valerathos, a seasoned Krillian physician with decades of experience treating war wounds, had seen countless horrors throughout her career. The blue-scale doctor had patched up soldiers from 17 different species, witnessed the aftermath of plasma bombardments, and treated victims of nerve gas attacks. Nothing, however, had prepared her for the broken creature lying on the biobed before her. HFY was barely recognizable as a member of the proud Vorthan warrior caste. The once mighty alien's forearms trembled constantly, his chitinous exoskeleton cracked and scarred beyond any hope of natural healing. His compound eyes, once sharp enough to spot prey from 3 kilometers away, now darted frantically around the sterile room as if expecting an attack from the shadows. Most disturbing of all was the way he flinched whenever anyone approached, even the gentle medical staff who had saved his life. "Please," HFY whispered in heavily accented galactic standard, his voice barely audible through his damaged vocal cords. "No more questions today. The memories, they come back when I speak of it." Dr. Thos set down her datapad and pulled up a chair beside the biobed. Her patient had been recovered from the wreckage of a Vorthan military transport 3 days ago, the sole survivor of what should have been a routine patrol mission near the disputed border with human space. The other 47 crew members hadn't been so fortunate. "HFY," she said gently, her voice taking on the soothing tone she'd perfected over years of trauma counseling. "I understand this is difficult, but the council needs to know what happened out there. The reports we're receiving from the front lines, they don't make sense. 3 separate Vorthan battle groups have been completely destroyed in the past week alone. That's over 10,000 elite warriors, vanished without a trace." The damaged alien's antennae twitched at the mention of his fallen comrades. Since the war with humanity began 8 months ago, the Galactic Council had grown increasingly concerned about the reports filtering back from the conflict zone. The humans, according to initial intelligence, were a young species with primitive technology and no real military experience. Their world should have fallen within weeks. Instead, the mighty Vorthan Empire, feared throughout the galaxy for their military prowess, was hemorrhaging ships and personnel at an alarming rate. Entire fleets sent to pacify human colonies simply disappeared. The few survivors who made it back told increasingly wild stories about human tactics and capabilities that sounded more like mythology than military reports. "Doctor," HFY managed, struggling to sit up on the biobed. "You must understand. The humans, they are not what the Council believes them to be. They are not primitive. They are not weak. They are..." He paused, his whole body shuddering as memories flooded back. "They are something else entirely." The Krillian physician activated her recording device with a subtle gesture. As the senior medical officer aboard the rescue vessel, she had been tasked with debriefing any survivors they encountered. The Council desperately needed intelligence about human military capabilities, and HFY represented their best source of first-hand information. "Start from the beginning," Dr. Thos encouraged. "Your ship was on routine patrol in the Kepler 442 system when you encountered human forces. What happened first?" HFY closed his compound eyes and took several deep breaths, a meditative technique common among his species. When he opened them again, they held a haunted quality that made the doctor's skin crawl. "We detected their ships on long-range sensors," he began slowly. 3 human vessels, classification unknown. Our intelligence said they used chemically propelled projectiles and basic energy weapons. Our shields should have been more than adequate protection." He laughed bitterly. Commander Vextar was confident. He ordered an immediate attack, expecting easy victory. The Vorthan's forearms gestured weakly as he continued. "Our battlecruiser Talon's Edge was state-of-the-art. Plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, adaptive shielding. We had destroyed pirate fleets with less firepower. But, when we engaged the humans..." His voice trailed off. "What happened?" Dr. Thos prompted gently. "They moved wrong," HFY said, his antennae flattening against his skull. "Their ships, they moved like they were alive. Like predators. We fired our main batteries, full spread pattern. Should have vaporized anything in a 10-kilometer radius. But, they weren't there anymore." The medical bay's lighting seemed to dim as the traumatized alien continued his account. Outside the viewport, stars wheeled slowly as the rescue vessel continued its patrol pattern, searching for more survivors in the debris field that had once been a proud Vorthan fleet. "The humans had weapons we never imagined," HFY whispered. Not just better technology. Different technology. They fired projectiles that seemed to think for themselves, changing course mid-flight to find weak points in our armor. Their energy beams cut through our shields like they weren't even there. But that wasn't the worst part. Dr. Thos leaned forward, her professional curiosity warring with a growing sense of unease. What was the worst part? They talked to us during the battle, the Vorthan said, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. On all frequencies. In perfect Vorthan. They knew our names, our families, our service records. They knew everything about us. And they used that knowledge like a weapon. The concept was so alien to galactic military doctrine that Dr. Thos struggled to understand it. Warfare among the civilized species was typically conducted with formal challenges, agreed upon rules of engagement, and respect for fallen enemies. The idea of psychological warfare during combat was considered barbaric by most advanced cultures. Commander Vexstar tried to surrender, HFY continued. He transmitted our formal yield signal, expecting the humans to follow the galactic war conventions. They laughed. And then, they told him exactly how they were going to kill every member of our crew, starting with the youngest cadets. The traumatized alien's breathing became rapid and shallow as the memories overwhelmed him. Dr. Thos quickly administered a mild sedative, watching as his vital signs gradually stabilized. The humans didn't just want to destroy our ship, HFY managed between ragged breaths. They wanted to break us. To make us afraid. They broadcasted the deaths of our warriors over the communication channels, forcing the survivors to listen as their friends and comrades were hunted down in the corridors. Dr. Thos felt her own composure slipping as she processed the implications of what she was hearing. The Galactic Council had strict protocols governing warfare between spacefaring civilizations. The systematic torture and execution of enemy combatants was not just forbidden, it was unthinkable among species that had achieved faster-than-light travel. How did you survive? She asked. HFY's compound eyes focused on something beyond the medical bay walls, as if seeing ghosts in the sterile corridor outside. Emergency pod. I was in the engine section when the humans breached our hull. I heard them coming through the passages, hunting down anyone still alive. Their footsteps, they didn't sound right. Too heavy. Too deliberate. Like they weren't rushing to finish the battle, but savoring it. The alien's description sent chills down the doctor's spine. Every species she knew conducted space battles at distance, using technology to minimize direct contact between combatants. The idea of boarding enemy vessels and engaging in close-quarters combat was considered crude and inefficient by galactic standards. I sealed myself in the pod and activated the emergency beacon, HFY continued. But, before I ejected, I heard them in the corridor outside. They were singing. In perfect Vorthan. A death song from our oldest military traditions. Songs that aren't supposed to be known outside our species. Dr. Thos made careful notes as her patient continued, though part of her wished she could stop the recording. The implications of what she was hearing would shake the foundations of everything the Galactic Council believed about human capabilities. The pod sensors showed the humans spending hours aboard our ship, HFY said. They weren't looting or salvaging technology. They were collecting things. Personal items. Memory crystals. Biological samples. Like they were studying us. The Krillian physician paused in her note-taking. Studying you for what purpose? I don't know, the Vorthan admitted. But, 3 days later, when your people found me, the humans were gone. They left no trace except the wreckage and... He shuddered violently. They left messages. Carved into the hull plating in 17 different galactic languages. Warnings for anyone who found the debris. What did the messages say? HFY closed his eyes again, clearly struggling with the memory. They said that any species that allied with the Vorthan Empire in this war would suffer the same fate. They listed the home worlds of every major council member by name, along with detailed descriptions of their planetary defenses. Information that should have been impossible for them to obtain. The medical bay fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. Dr. Thos stared at her notes, trying to reconcile what she was hearing with everything the council knew about human civilization. According to their intelligence, humans were barely a century into their space age. They had no allies among the established galactic powers and no access to advanced military technology. Doctor, HFY said suddenly, grabbing her arm with one of his remaining functional hands. You must understand. The humans aren't fighting a war the way we understand war. They're not trying to conquer territory or capture resources. They're trying to teach the galaxy to fear them. And they're succeeding. The traumatized alien released his grip and sank back onto the biobed, exhausted by the effort of sharing his story. Dr. Thos continued taking notes, but her mind was already racing ahead to the implications of what she had learned. If HFY's account was accurate, the Galactic Council was facing an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. An enemy that fought not just with superior technology, but with a fundamental understanding of warfare that transcended the civilized rules of engagement that had governed galactic conflicts for millennia. There's something else, HFY whispered, so quietly that Dr. Thos had to lean close to hear him. Something I haven't told you yet. What is it? The humans, they let me escape. The Vorthan's antennae drooped with shame and terror. My pod was damaged. The beacon was barely functional. I should have died in the wreckage with the rest of my crew. But they repaired the beacon before they left. They wanted me to be found. They wanted me to tell this story. The revelation hit Dr. Thos like a physical blow. The humans hadn't just defeated a superior Vorthan battle group, they had orchestrated the entire encounter to send a message. A message that was now being delivered directly to the highest levels of the Galactic Council through their own rescue and medical protocols. Why, she asked, though part of her already suspected the answer. HFY's compound eyes met hers, and she saw in them a depth of fear that made her own species' concept of terror seem pale by comparison. Because they want us to know they're coming, he whispered. And they want us to be afraid when they arrive. As if responding to his words, the rescue vessel's proximity alarms began to sound in the distance. Dr. Thos felt her blood turn cold as the automated voice of the ship's computer announced the detection of unidentified vessels approaching at high speed. Through the viewport, she could see new stars appearing where none had been before. But, as they grew brighter, she realized they weren't stars at all. They were engine signatures. Human engine signatures. The nightmare HFY had described was about to begin again, and, this time, Dr. Thos and her crew would experience firsthand the terror that had broken one of the galaxy's most feared warriors. The humans had come to deliver their message in person. Captain Mordun Kelash had commanded the rescue vessel Harmony's Light for 12 standard years without encountering a situation his training hadn't prepared him for. The tall, gray-skinned Nexarian officer prided himself on his ability to remain calm under pressure, a trait that had served him well during countless humanitarian missions across the galaxy. As he stood on the bridge watching the approaching human ships, however, he felt his confidence cracking like ice under pressure. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission on all frequencies," reported Lieutenant Ysera from the communications station. The young serpentine's scales had shifted to the pale yellow of extreme anxiety. It's in perfect Nexarian, sir. They're speaking our language like natives." Captain Kalash moved to the central command chair, his mind racing through diplomatic protocols. The Harmony's Light was clearly marked as a medical vessel, protected under galactic law from attack during humanitarian missions. Surely even the humans would respect such basic conventions of civilized space travel. "Put it through," he ordered, settling into his chair with as much dignity as he could manage. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the interior of what appeared to be a human command bridge. The figure addressing them was unmistakably human, bipedal, pale-skinned, with short brown hair and eyes the color of old ice. What struck Captain Kalash immediately was how ordinary the creature looked. Nothing about its appearance suggested the monster described by the traumatized Vorthan survivor in their medical bay. "Greetings, Captain Kalash," the human said with a slight smile that somehow managed to be more unsettling than any snarl would have been. "I am Commander Sarachin of the Terran Defense Force vessel Retribution. We understand you have recently recovered a survivor from the Vorthan engagement in this sector." The casual use of his name sent a chill down the captain's spine. The Harmony's Light was operating under communications silence, and their identification beacon had been deactivated to avoid attracting attention while conducting search and rescue operations. There was no way the human should have known either his identity or his ship's mission. "This vessel is protected under Article 7 of the Galactic Medical Convention," Captain Kalash replied, fighting to keep his voice steady. "We are conducting humanitarian rescue operations and pose no threat to your forces." Commander Chen's smile widened slightly, and the Nexarian captain noticed she had remarkably sharp teeth for an herbivorous species. According to the biological surveys in the Council database, humans were primarily plant eaters with limited predatory instincts. "Oh, Captain, we have no intention of harming your ship or crew," the human commander said pleasantly. "In fact, we'd like to offer our assistance. We have extensive medical facilities aboard our vessels, and we understand you're currently treating a severely traumatized patient." Lieutenant Ysera's scales shifted to deep purple, the serpentine equivalent of turning pale with shock. She caught her captain's attention and gestured frantically toward her sensor readouts. On the display, 3 human ships had taken up positions around the rescue vessel in a perfect triangular formation. The precision of their movement was unlike anything in the tactical databases. "We appreciate your offer," Captain Kalash said carefully, "but our medical facilities are more than adequate for our patients' needs." "I'm sure they are," Commander Chen replied, her tone remaining conversational. "But, you see, Captain, your patient has been sharing some rather interesting stories with your medical staff. Stories that contain certain inaccuracies about recent events. We'd like the opportunity to provide a more complete picture of what actually transpired." The blood in Captain Kalash's veins seemed to freeze. The medical bay was supposedly secure, protected by multiple layers of encryption and isolated from the ship's general communication systems. The idea that the humans had somehow monitored Dr. Thassa's interview with the Vorthan survivor was impossible according to every security protocol he knew. "I'm afraid that's not possible," he said, proud that his voice remained steady. "Patient confidentiality is protected under Article 12 of the Galactic Medical Convention." "Yes," Commander Chen interrupted smoothly. "However, that protection doesn't extend to enemy combatants spreading military intelligence, does it? And your passenger is most definitely still a member of the Vorthan military, even if he's currently indisposed." On his tactical display, Captain Kalash watched in growing horror as the human ships began to move in a complex pattern around his vessel. Their movements were too coordinated, too precise. It was like watching a dance performed by predators circling wounded prey. "Sir," whispered his tactical officer, a massive Gorlian whose species was renowned for their military prowess, "their weapon signatures, they don't match anything in our database. The energy readings are off the scale." Commander Chen seemed to hear the whispered comment despite the supposed security of the bridge. "Your tactical officer is quite observant, Captain. We've made some significant improvements to our weapon systems since the war began. Would you like a demonstration?" Before Captain Kalash could respond, one of the human ships fired a single beam of energy at a piece of debris floating nearby. The massive chunk of twisted metal, part of a Vorthan battlecruiser's hull plating, simply vanished. Not vaporized or destroyed, it was there one moment and gone the next, leaving no trace it had ever existed. "Impressive, isn't it?" Commander Chen said conversationally. "We call it a molecular disintegrator. It breaks the bonds between atoms at the quantum level. Very efficient, very clean. No messy explosions or debris fields to worry about." The bridge of the Harmony's light fell silent except for the quiet hum of life support systems. Captain Kalash found himself staring at empty space where a piece of military-grade armor plating had existed seconds before. The implications of the technology he'd just witnessed were staggering. "Now then," the human commander continued, "about our patient. We'd really like the opportunity to speak with him. Just a friendly conversation between allies." "We are not allies," Captain Kalash said, finding his voice again. "The Nexarian Republic maintains strict neutrality in this conflict." "Neutrality is such an interesting concept," Commander Chen mused. "You rescue Vorthan survivors and provide them with medical care, allowing them to return to their forces and continue fighting against us. That doesn't sound very neutral to me." Lieutenant Ysera's console erupted in warning signals as the human ship suddenly accelerated, closing to within a few hundred meters of the rescue vessel. At that range, their weapon systems could reduce the Harmony's light to its component atoms in seconds. "We are a medical vessel," Captain Kalash protested. "We provide aid to anyone in need, regardless of their species or political affiliation. It's our mandate under galactic law. And we respect that mandate," Commander Chen assured him. "Which is why we're going to give you a choice. You can transfer your patient to our custody voluntarily, or we can board your ship and collect him ourselves. Either way, we will be speaking with him today." The Nexarian captain felt sweat beading on his forehead despite the bridge's climate control. His ship carried a crew of 47 beings from 7 different species, most of them medical personnel who had dedicated their lives to saving others. The thought of them facing the same fate as the Vorthan battle group made his hands shake. "If we comply with your demand," he said slowly, "will you allow my ship and crew to depart safely?" "Of course," the human replied with that unsettling smile. "We have no quarrel with medical personnel who are simply doing their jobs. However, we will need to ensure that certain, sensitive information doesn't find its way into the wrong hands." On his command console, Captain Kalash noticed that the ship's computer systems were showing anomalous activity. Data streams that shouldn't exist were flowing between various subsystems, and several secured databases were reporting unauthorized access attempts. "Sir," his communications officer reported in a voice tight with fear, "they're in our systems. Somehow, they've bypassed all our security protocols. They're accessing everything: crew records, medical files, navigation logs, even our personal communications." Commander Chen's image on the screen nodded approvingly. "We apologize for the intrusion, Captain, but we need to verify that you are who you claim to be." Identity verification is so important in wartime, don't you think? The violation of his ship's computer systems was a hostile act that justified self-defense under any interpretation of galactic law. Captain Kalash's hand moved instinctively toward the weapons control panel, then stopped as he remembered the demonstration of human firepower he'd just witnessed. "What do you want with our patient?" he asked instead. "Simply to correct some misunderstandings," the human commander replied. "Your survivor has been sharing a rather one-sided account of recent events. We'd like to provide some context that might help the Galactic Council better understand the current situation." Dr. Thassa's voice crackled through the internal communications system, heavy with urgency. "Captain, our patient is having another episode. His vital signs are spiking, and he keeps talking about humans coming for him. I think he can sense their presence somehow." The revelation that the traumatized Vorthan could somehow detect the nearby human ships added another layer of mystery to an already incomprehensible situation. Captain Kalash had never heard of any species possessing such sensitivity to the proximity of other sentient beings. "HFY has very acute survival instincts," Commander Chen observed, apparently monitoring all of the ship's internal communications. "It's what kept him alive during our last encounter. We were quite impressed by his resourcefulness." The casual reference to the survivor by name sent another chill through the bridge crew. Not only had the humans accessed the ship's databases, they had somehow connected the information to their previous encounters with Vorthan forces. "You let him escape deliberately," Captain Kalash said, pieces of the puzzle falling into place. "You wanted him to be found. You wanted him to tell his story." Psychological warfare is a time-honored tradition among human military forces, the commander confirmed. Fear is often more effective than direct force in achieving strategic objectives. Your survivor has done an excellent job of spreading awareness about human capabilities throughout the galactic community. Lieutenant Ysera's scales had now shifted to the deep black of abject terror. "Sir, I'm detecting transport signatures. They're beaming aboard." The concept was impossible according to known physics. Transporters were theoretical technology that existed only in the realm of scientific speculation. The energy requirements alone should have made such devices impractical for anything larger than subatomic particles. "Security to all decks," Captain Kalash ordered, though he knew his small security force would be useless against enemies who could bypass his ship's shields and hull plating at will. "There's no need for violence, Captain," Commander Chen said calmly. "Our boarding party consists of a single individual who simply wishes to speak with your patient. No one will be harmed as long as they don't interfere with our mission." On the internal sensor display, Captain Kalash could see a single humanoid figure materializing in the corridor outside the medical bay. The being appeared to be wearing some kind of advanced armor that registered as nearly invisible to the ship's sensors. Dr. Thassa's voice came through the communications system again, this time filled with panic. "Captain, there's someone in the medical bay. They just appeared. HFY is having some kind of seizure. His brain activity is off the charts. Tell your medical staff to step away from the patient," Commander Chen instructed. "Our representative will handle things from here." The next few minutes passed in tense silence as the crew of the Harmony's Light listened to faint sounds from the medical bay transmitted through the ship's internal monitoring system. There were no sounds of violence or struggle, just quiet conversation in a language none of them recognized. Finally, Dr. Thassa's voice returned to the communications channel, though she sounded dazed and confused. "Captain, the human is gone. Just vanished. But, HFY, he's different. His vital signs have stabilized, but he's asking to speak with you immediately. He says he needs to correct his previous statement. Captain Kalash felt a sinking sensation in his stomach as he realized what had just occurred. Somehow, in the space of a few minutes, the humans had fundamentally altered the traumatized Vorthan's perspective on recent events. Whether through advanced technology, psychological manipulation, or something else entirely, they had achieved their objective without firing a shot or harming anyone aboard his ship. "Thank you for your cooperation, Captain," Commander Chen said pleasantly. "Your crew has been most professional throughout this encounter. We trust that your report to the Galactic Council will accurately reflect what you've witnessed here today." The human ships began to withdraw from their positions around the rescue vessel, their movements as precisely coordinated as their approach had been. Within minutes, they had vanished beyond the range of the ship's sensors, leaving no trace of their presence except for the lingering violation of every security protocol Captain Kalash had believed to be inviolable. As the bridge crew tried to process what they had experienced, one thing became clear: the war between humanity and the Galactic Council was unlike any conflict in recorded history. The humans weren't just fighting with superior technology, they were fighting with a fundamental understanding of warfare that rendered traditional military doctrine obsolete. And if Zephai's revised account was anything like his original story, the galaxy was about to learn just how terrifying human ingenuity could be when applied to the art of war. Dr. Thos stared at her patient in complete bewilderment. The broken, traumatized creature who had barely been able to speak coherently just an hour ago now sat upright on the biobed, his compound eyes clear and focused. The trembling that had plagued him since his rescue had stopped entirely, and his voice carried a strange new resonance when he spoke. "Doctor," Zephai said in perfect galactic standard, his accent completely gone, "I need to correct some statements I made during our previous conversation. My memory of recent events was incomplete." The Krillian physician checked her medical readings in confusion. According to every biological indicator, her patient should still be in severe psychological shock. The neural patterns associated with post-traumatic stress disorder hadn't simply improved, they had been completely recalibrated. It was as if someone had reached into his mind and rewired his entire emotional response system. "Zephai, what happened when the human visited you?" Dr. Thos asked carefully. "My readings show that you were unconscious for only a few minutes, but your entire neurological profile has changed." The Vorthan tilted his head in a gesture that seemed oddly human. "The human didn't visit me, Doctor. The human educated me." There's a significant difference between the two concepts. Captain Kalash's voice crackled through the medical bay's communication system. "Dr. Thos, I need you and your patient in conference room 3 immediately. The Galactic Council is demanding a full debrief of this incident." As they made their way through the ship's corridors, Dr. Thos noticed that Zephai moved with a confidence that was completely at odds with his previous condition. His gait was steady, his posture erect, and his eyes scanned their surroundings with an alertness that bordered on predatory awareness. Conference Room 3 held the ship's senior staff, all of whom looked like they'd rather be anywhere else in the galaxy. Captain Kalash sat at the head of the table, his gray skin slightly darker than usual with stress. The holographic display in the center of the room showed a real-time connection to council chambers on the neutral world of Sanctuary. High Counselor Vexmoth, the elderly Etherian who served as the council's military advisor, materialized as a shimmering blue projection. Behind him, representatives from 12 major galactic civilizations observed the proceedings with obvious concern. "Captain Kalash," the High Counselor said in his melodious voice, "we understand you've encountered human forces in the debris field. What is the status of the Vorthan survivor?" "The survivor is here with us, High Counselor," Captain Kalash replied. "However, I must report that the humans somehow boarded our ship without authorization and made contact with our patient. Since that encounter, he claims his previous testimony was inaccurate." A ripple of alarm ran through the assembled council members. The violation of a medical vessel's integrity was unprecedented in galactic diplomatic history. Several representatives began speaking at once, their various languages creating a cacophony of outrage and confusion. "If I may," Zephai interjected, his voice cutting through the noise with unexpected authority. "I would like to address the misconceptions that appear to be widespread among the council leadership regarding human military capabilities." High Counselor Vexmoth gestured for silence. "Proceed, Warrior Zephai. We are eager to hear your corrected account." The Vorthan stood, and Dr. Thos noticed that he held himself like a different person entirely. Where before he had been broken and fearful, he now projected an aura of calm confidence that was almost hypnotic. My initial report, HFY began, focused on the emotional impact of my encounter with human forces. I described them as monsters, as creatures who violated the basic principles of civilized warfare. These characterizations were accurate in terms of their psychological effect, but they failed to convey the true nature of what we're facing. He paused, his compound eyes scanning the holographic faces of the council members. The humans are not monsters. They are something far more dangerous. They are evolution in action. High Counselor Vexmoth leaned forward in his chair. Explain this statement, warrior. Every species represented in this council achieved spaceflight through a similar path, HFY continued. We developed technology, formed governments, established military hierarchies based on existing social structures. We took our planetary conflicts and simply moved them into space, using bigger weapons and faster ships to fight the same kinds of wars our ancestors had fought for millennia. Dr. Thos found herself taking notes despite her confusion about her patient's transformation. The clarity of his analysis was remarkable, especially considering his traumatized state just hours before. Humans evolved differently, the Vorthan explained. They didn't just develop technology, they weaponized evolution itself. Every challenge they faced made them stronger, more adaptable, more creative in their solutions. Their entire species is hardwired for what they call optimization under pressure. Representative Coulthar from the Mineraloid Coalition spoke up, his crystalline voice ringing with skepticism. You're describing a biological impossibility. No species can consciously direct its own evolutionary development. HFY smiled, and Dr. Thos noticed that his expression now carried the same unsettling quality she'd seen in Commander Chen's transmissions. That's exactly what humans thought until they proved themselves wrong. They didn't consciously direct their evolution, representative. They created conditions that forced their evolution to accelerate. The projection chamber fell silent as the implications of this statement sank in. Captain Kelash spoke first, his voice barely above a whisper. Are you saying they engineered their own development as a warrior species? Not engineered, HFY corrected. Refined. Humans spent their entire history fighting wars against each other. Not just territorial conflicts or resource disputes, but existential struggles for survival that lasted generations. They fought wars that killed significant portions of their population, and each time they survived, they became more efficient at warfare. High Counselor Vexmoth's image flickered as he processed this information. The intelligence reports suggest humans have been at peace for over a century. Their last major conflict ended before they achieved spaceflight. Their last major conflict between human nations, HFY agreed. But they never stopped fighting. They simply redirected their competitive instincts toward preparation for the ultimate conflict, first contact with hostile alien species. Dr. Thos felt a chill run down her spine. You're saying they've been preparing for war with us since before they knew we existed? Not war with you specifically, the Vorthan clarified. War with anyone who might threaten their survival. It's what they do. It's what they are. Every human simulation, every training exercise, every technological development for the past century has been focused on a single question: how do we survive contact with a superior galactic civilization? The answer, according to HFY's revised account, had been to become something unprecedented in galactic history. The humans had turned their entire civilization into a military research project, with each generation building upon the lessons learned by their predecessors. Their weapons systems aren't just advanced, he explained. They're adaptive. They learn from every engagement, incorporating new data into their tactical databases in real time. The ship that destroyed my battle group became more effective with each enemy vessel it encountered. Representative THYSS from the Serpentine Collective hissed in disbelief. You're describing artificial intelligence. Machine learning applied to warfare. Such technology has been banned by galactic treaty for over 1,000 years. Banned by species who were afraid of creating something they couldn't control, HFY replied. Humans embraced that fear. They built their entire military doctrine around the concept of controlled evolution. Their artificial intelligences don't just process information, they get better at processing information with every iteration. The revelation sent shockwaves through the council chamber. The prohibition against self-improving artificial intelligence was one of the oldest and most fundamental laws governing galactic civilization. The technology had been deemed too dangerous for any species to develop, as it could theoretically lead to the creation of entities that surpassed their creators. There's more, HFY continued relentlessly. Human military personnel undergo what they call cognitive enhancement. They use technology to accelerate their own thinking processes during combat. A human soldier can experience hours of subjective time during seconds of real-time engagement, allowing them to analyze and respond to situations faster than any natural biological process should permit. Dr. Thos realized she was witnessing the systematic demolition of everything the Galactic Council believed about the limitations of warfare. Each revelation built upon the previous one, creating a picture of an enemy that operated according to principles that bordered on the incomprehensible. Their psychological warfare isn't cruelty, the Vorthan explained. It's precision targeting of enemy morale based on detailed psychological profiles. They knew exactly what words to use, what actions to take, to break the will of my crew members because they had studied our species for decades before first contact. High Counselor Vexmotha's image wavered as he struggled to maintain his composure. How did they acquire such detailed information about our species? We've had no contact with them until the current conflict began. HFY's smile widened, and, for a moment he looked almost predatory. They've been observing us for longer than you might think, High Counselor. Human intelligence gathering operations are based on a simple principle: assume your enemies are more advanced than they appear to be, and prepare accordingly. The implications were staggering. If humans had been conducting covert surveillance of galactic civilization for decades or even centuries, then every strategic assumption the Council had made about their capabilities was potentially wrong. They know our military protocols, our technological limitations, our political structures, and our psychological weaknesses, HFY continued. They've been preparing for this war since before most of us were born, and they've designed their entire approach around the assumption that they would be facing multiple superior civilizations simultaneously. Representative Coultar's crystalline form flickered with agitation. Even assuming your account is accurate, they remain a single species facing the combined might of the Galactic Council. Numbers alone should ensure their defeat. Numbers become irrelevant when your enemy can turn your own advantages against you, the Vorthan replied. Humans don't fight fair. They don't follow established rules of engagement. They don't respect the conventions that govern civilized warfare. They fight to win, using whatever methods prove most effective. The conference chamber fell into a heavy silence as the council members absorbed this information. Dr. Thos found herself wondering how much of what she was hearing represented HFY's actual observations versus information that had been implanted during his mysterious encounter with the human boarding party. There is one more thing you need to understand, HFY said quietly. The humans who visited this ship aren't trying to conquer the galaxy. They're trying to teach it. Teach it what? High Counselor Vexmoth asked. That the age of civilized warfare is over, the Vorthan replied. That species who want to survive in the universe will need to evolve beyond their current limitations. They see themselves as instructors in the art of survival. The final revelation hung in the air like a physical presence. The idea that humanity viewed the current conflict as an educational exercise rather than a traditional war was perhaps more terrifying than any weapon they might possess. As the council members began debating the implications of what they had heard, Dr. Thos continued studying her transformed patient. Whatever had happened during his brief encounter with the human visitor, it had fundamentally changed not just his perspective but his entire personality. The question that haunted her was simple but profound: was she looking at a recovered HFY, or at something else entirely wearing his form? The emergency session of the Galactic Council continued for 6 standard hours, with representatives from across the galaxy struggling to comprehend the implications of HFY's revelations. Dr. Thos remained in the conference room, ostensibly to monitor her patient's condition, but, increasingly she found herself studying him like a xenobiologist examining a new species. The transformation was complete and disturbing. Every mannerism, every gesture, every inflection in his voice had changed since his encounter with the human visitor. More troubling still, he seemed to possess knowledge that no Vorthan military officer should have access to detailed information about galactic military capabilities, political structures, and strategic weaknesses that crossed species boundaries. If I may address the Council's tactical concerns, HFY said during a brief pause in the heated discussion, I believe I can provide specific examples of how human adaptive warfare manifests in actual combat situations. High Counselor Vexmoth nodded warily. The elderly Etherian had been fielding increasingly panicked communications from member world military commands throughout the session. Please proceed, warrior. Our strategic planners need concrete data to work with. HFY stood and moved to the holographic display controls with a familiarity that made Dr. Thas's skin crawl. Her patient had never operated console technology before, yet he manipulated the complex interface with the ease of someone who had used it for years. The engagement between my ship and the human forces began at 0347 hours, Galactic Standard Time. He began, calling up a three-dimensional tactical display that showed the positions of both fleets. Our initial formation was standard Vorthan battle doctrine, heavy units in the center, fast attack craft on the flanks, support vessels in the rear. The display showed the deployment in precise detail, far more accurate than any combat recording should have been possible from a single escape pod. Dr. Thas made a note to investigate how her patient had acquired such comprehensive battlefield data. The humans approached in a formation that our tactical computers classified as chaotic, HFY continued. No recognizable pattern, no obvious command structure, individual ships operating with apparent independence. Our battle analysis predicted easy victory with minimal losses. Representative Morgoth from the Titan hegemony, a species known for their military expertise, leaned forward with interest. What changed that prediction? The humans weren't following a formation because they didn't need one, the Vorthan explained. Each ship was operating as part of a distributed intelligence network. They shared sensor data, tactical analysis, and targeting information in real time across quantum encrypted channels. Effectively, we weren't fighting three separate ships, we were fighting one organism with three bodies. The tactical display shifted to show the battle's progression in real time. Human ships moved with an eerie coordination, each vessel's actions complementing the others in ways that seemed to defy the laws of physics. When we opened fire with our main batteries, HFY continued, the humans had already calculated our targeting solutions and begun evasive maneuvers. Not just simple course changes, they were altering their ship's mass distribution and energy signatures to make our weapons less effective. Dr. Thas watched the display with growing horror as the simulation showed human vessels literally shapeshifting in response to incoming fire. Hull configurations changed, weapon placements shifted, and even the ship's energy signatures fluctuated in patterns that made consistent targeting impossible. Impossible, declared Representative THYSS Era. No known technology allows for real-time structural modification of spacecraft hulls. No known technology in the galactic database, HFY corrected gently. Humans developed what they call programmable matter, materials that can alter their physical properties in response to external stimuli. Their ships aren't built, they're grown. The implications sent shockwaves through the assembled council members. Programmable matter had been theoretical for centuries, requiring advances in nanotechnology that most species considered centuries away from practical application. Our plasma cannons achieved direct hits on multiple occasions, the Vorthan continued, manipulating the display to highlight specific moments in the battle. Each time, the targeted ship absorbed the energy and channeled it into its own weapon systems. They were using our attacks to power their counterstrikes. High Counselor Vexmotha's image flickered with distress. Energy absorption on that scale would require perfect understanding of plasma dynamics and quantum energy conversion. Such technology would revolutionize peaceful applications as well as military ones. Humans don't distinguish between peaceful and military applications, HFY replied. Every advancement serves both purposes simultaneously. It's part of their optimization philosophy, nothing exists that can't be weaponized if necessary. The battle simulation continued, showing how human forces systematically dismantled the Vorthan formation using tactics that seemed to exist outside conventional strategic thinking. Rather than destroying enemy ships outright, they disabled specific systems while leaving life support intact, forcing the crew to watch helplessly as their comrades were eliminated. The psychological component was precisely calculated, the transformed alien explained. They wanted survivors to witness the futility of resistance. Every action was designed to maximize the psychological impact on any rescue forces that might discover the wreckage. Dr. Thas found herself taking notes on the tactical analysis despite her growing unease about her patient's transformation. The level of strategic thinking he was displaying went far beyond what any individual soldier should possess, regardless of species. There's something else the Council needs to understand about human warfare, HFY said, turning away from the tactical display. They don't fight wars to win territory or capture resources. They fight wars to change the fundamental nature of their enemies. Representative Coultar's crystalline form pulsed with agitation. Explain this concept. Traditional galactic warfare assumes that defeated enemies will eventually recover and, potentially become threats again, the Vorthan replied. Humans have developed methods to ensure that recovery is impossible. Not through genocide or planetary destruction, but through what they call cognitive restructuring. The phrase hung in the air like a curse. Several council members began speaking at once, their voices rising in alarm as the implications became clear. You're describing mental conditioning on a species-wide scale, High Counselor Vexmoth said slowly. The technology required for such operations is far beyond our current understanding of neuroscience. Not beyond human understanding, HFY corrected. They've been developing these techniques for longer than most council species have possessed spaceflight. The difference is that they've been willing to test them on themselves first. Dr. Thos felt her professional curiosity warring with mounting horror. Are you saying humans have been conducting psychological experiments on their own population? Not experiments, the alien replied with that unsettling smile. Improvements. Humans discovered centuries ago that their own psychology was their greatest limitation in warfare. So they began modifying it. The revelation was perhaps more disturbing than any weapon system they had described. The idea of a species deliberately altering its own mental processes for military advantage challenged every assumption about the relationship between consciousness and identity. Current human military personnel operate with enhanced cognitive capabilities, modified emotional responses, and what they call expanded situational awareness, HFY continued. They're still recognizably human, but they're no longer limited by baseline human psychology. Representative Morgotha's massive form shifted uneasily. Such modifications would be considered crimes against sentient dignity under Council law. Council law assumes that consciousness is sacred and immutable, the Vorthan replied. Humans consider consciousness to be another tool that can be improved through application of proper techniques. They've weaponized their own minds. The conference chamber erupted in debate as council members struggled to process the implications of this information. The concept of voluntary psychological modification for military purposes was so alien to galactic thinking that many representatives seemed unable to even discuss it coherently. During the chaos, Dr. Thos noticed something that made her blood run cold. HFY was watching the council members with an expression of clinical detachment, as if he were studying laboratory subjects rather than participating in a diplomatic discussion. Patient, she said quietly, using the old form of address, are you still HFY? The transformed alien turned to look at her, and, for a moment his compound eyes held depths of intelligence that seemed utterly inhuman. That's an interesting philosophical question, Doctor. Am I the same individual who was rescued from the debris field 3 days ago? Biologically, yes. Psychologically. He paused thoughtfully. Let's say I've undergone some educational experiences that have expanded my perspective. What did they do to you during that visit? They showed me what I could become, he replied simply. Humans don't believe in forced conversion, Doctor. They believe in offering choices and allowing individuals to select the option that best serves their survival needs. The clinical way he discussed his own transformation was perhaps more unsettling than any of the military revelations he had shared. Dr. Thos realized she was looking at a being who retained all of HFY's memories and knowledge, but who now viewed the universe through a fundamentally different lens. The council is making a mistake, he said quietly, watching the continued debate among the representatives. They're trying to address human capabilities using traditional diplomatic and military frameworks. It's like trying to negotiate with a force of nature. What would you recommend? Dr. Thos asked, though part of her was afraid to hear the answer. HFY smiled again, and, this time the expression held genuine warmth rather than predatory calculation. Evolution, Doctor. The same choice humans offered me. The choice between adaptation and extinction. As the council session continued around them, Dr. Thos found herself wondering if she was witnessing the beginning of humanity's victory in a war that most of the galaxy didn't even realize had already been decided. The humans weren't just fighting to win. They were fighting to transform their enemies into something new. Something better. Something more like themselves. And, judging by the change in her patient, they were succeeding. 3 weeks after the encounter with human forces, the Harmony's light docked at Sanctuary Station, the neutral diplomatic facility that served as the Galactic Council's headquarters. Dr. Thos accompanied her patient through the bustling corridors, noting how other beings instinctively moved aside as HFY passed. Something about his presence now commanded immediate respect, even from species that had never encountered a Vorthan before. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable. His posture radiated quiet confidence, his movements were economical and precise, and his eyes held an awareness that seemed to process everything around him at multiple levels simultaneously. Most disturbing of all, other council personnel seemed drawn to him, lingering nearby to listen whenever he spoke. "Doctor," HFY said as they walked toward the high-security briefing chambers, "I know you've been studying my neural patterns. What conclusions have you reached about my condition?" Dr. Thos had indeed been conducting extensive scans throughout their journey to Sanctuary Station. The results defied every principle of neurobiology she understood. "Your brain activity has increased by approximately 40% since the human encounter," she admitted. "New neural pathways have formed at a rate that should be biologically impossible, and you're accessing regions of your mind that typically remain dormant in Vorthan physiology." "And yet I experience no sense of loss or violation," he replied thoughtfully. "If anything, I feel more authentically myself than I ever have before. It's as if I've been operating at reduced capacity my entire life without realizing it." The concept troubled Dr. Thos more than she cared to admit. According to her medical training, such radical neurological changes should have resulted in personality fragmentation or complete psychological breakdown. Instead, HFY demonstrated enhanced cognitive function across every measurable parameter. They entered the high-security briefing chamber where Admiral Korthak, the Council's supreme military commander, waited with his senior staff. The massive Gorlian warrior's expression was grim as he reviewed tactical displays showing the expanding zone of human activity along the galactic rim. "Warrior HFY," the Admiral rumbled in his deep voice, "your previous briefing has caused considerable upheaval among our strategic planners. We need clarification on several points before we can formulate an effective response to the human threat." HFY took a seat at the briefing table with fluid grace. "I'm at your service, Admiral. However, I should note that referring to humans as a threat may not be the most productive framework for understanding the current situation." Admiral Korthak's eyes narrowed. "They have destroyed 17 battle groups in the past month alone. How would you characterize that if not a threat?" "Education," the transformed Vorthan replied calmly. "Humans are teaching the galaxy about the true nature of warfare. Those who learn quickly will survive and, potentially, benefit from the experience. Those who don't." The Admiral's massive fist struck the table with enough force to crack the reinforced material. "Are you suggesting the Council should surrender to these creatures?" "I'm suggesting the Council should recognize an opportunity when it presents itself," HFY said without flinching at the display of anger. "Humans aren't trying to destroy galactic civilization. They're trying to upgrade it." Dr. Thos watched the exchange with growing unease. Her patient was speaking with an authority that seemed to transcend his military rank, addressing one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy as if they were equals engaged in academic discussion. "Explain this upgrade process," Admiral Korthak demanded. HFY activated the briefing room's holographic display with casual familiarity. The image that appeared showed a star map of the local galactic region, with human-controlled systems highlighted in blue and areas of recent conflict marked in red. "Humans operate on evolutionary timescales," he explained. "They're not interested in conquering individual star systems or capturing specific resources. They're interested in fundamentally altering the trajectory of galactic civilization over the next several millennia." The display shifted to show projected expansion patterns based on current conflict data. Rather than the aggressive territorial acquisition typical of galactic warfare, human forces seemed to be following a pattern that prioritized strategic influence over direct control. They identify species and civilizations with specific capabilities or characteristics that complement their long-term objectives, HFY continued. Then, they create conditions that force those species to evolve beyond their current limitations. Admiral Korthak studied the projection with obvious confusion. "You're describing a process that would take thousands of years to implement. No species has the resources to maintain such an extended campaign." "No single species," the Vorthan agreed. "But humans aren't planning to do this alone. They're creating a coalition of upgraded civilizations that will collectively reshape the galaxy according to improved principles." Dr. Thos felt a chill run down her spine as she began to understand the implications. "You're saying they want to transform other species to be more like them?" "Not exactly," HFY replied. "They want to help other species become the best possible versions of themselves. Humans discovered that their greatest strength wasn't their technology or their military prowess, it was their ability to adapt and improve under pressure. They're sharing that capability. The briefing chamber fell silent as the assembled military officers processed this information. The concept of warfare as a tool for species improvement was so alien to their thinking that many seemed unable to respond coherently. "The modifications you've undergone," Admiral Korthak said slowly, "are you claiming they represent improvement?" HFY stood and moved to the tactical display, manipulating the controls with an expertise that should have taken years to develop. "I can now process information at rates that exceed baseline Vorthan capabilities by orders of magnitude. My reaction times have improved dramatically, my strategic thinking encompasses variables I was previously unable to perceive, and my understanding of complex systems has expanded exponentially." He turned to face the assembled officers, his compound eyes reflecting an intelligence that seemed almost luminous. "Most importantly, I now understand concepts that were literally incomprehensible to my previous cognitive framework. I've been upgraded, Admiral. And the process was voluntary." Dr. Thos activated her medical scanner and discreetly ran another neural analysis. The readings were even more dramatic than her previous scans had indicated. HFY's brain was operating at levels that approached theoretical maximums for his species. "The humans who visited your ship," Admiral Korthak said, "they offered you this enhancement?" "They offered me a choice," HFY corrected. "Continue existing within my previous limitations, or accept modifications that would allow me to reach my full potential. The decision was entirely mine." "And if you had refused?" "Then, I would have been returned to your custody unchanged, with my original memories intact," the Vorthan replied. "Humans don't believe in forced evolution. Pressure, yes. Educational opportunities, certainly. But the final choice always remains with the individual." The Admiral's expression grew even grimmer. "How many others have been given this choice?" HFY smiled, and, for the first time since his transformation, the expression carried a hint of sadness. "More than you might think, Admiral. Humans have been making these offers throughout the conflict zone. Most refuse, of course. The concept of voluntary cognitive modification violates deeply held beliefs about the sanctity of consciousness. But some accept," Dr. Thos said, understanding beginning to dawn. "Some accept," he confirmed. "And those who do become bridges between their original species and humanity. They help facilitate communication, provide cultural context, and, most importantly, they demonstrate that the process is beneficial rather than harmful." Admiral Korthak's massive form seemed to deflate slightly as the strategic implications became clear. "You're describing a conversion campaign designed to work from within our own military structure." "I prefer to think of it as an educational outreach program," HFY replied diplomatically. "Humans understand that lasting change must come from within. External pressure can create temporary compliance, but true transformation requires willing participation." The transformed alien moved to the briefing room's observation window, gazing out at the vast space dock where ships from dozens of species were docked for repairs and resupply. "Look at this station, Admiral. Representatives from across the galaxy, working together when it serves their interests but maintaining strict barriers between their civilizations. Humans see this as inefficient. Cooperation requires trust," Admiral Korthak pointed out. "Trust requires time to develop. Trust requires shared understanding," HFY corrected. "And shared understanding requires the ability to truly comprehend another species' perspective. Humans have developed techniques for accelerating that comprehension." Dr. Thos realized she was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history, the systematic recruitment of alien species into a collective consciousness project that spans stellar distances and evolutionary timescales. "The offers you mentioned," she said carefully, "are they still being extended?" HFY turned from the observation window, his compound eyes focusing on her with an intensity that was almost hypnotic. "The offers are always available, Doctor. Humans believe that every sentient being deserves the opportunity to reach their full potential. And if the Council as a whole refuses to accept these educational opportunities, then the Council will gradually become irrelevant," he replied matter-of-factly. "Not through military conquest, but through obsolescence. Modified individuals and species will naturally gravitate toward more efficient forms of organization and cooperation." The prediction hung in the air like a physical presence. Admiral Korthak and his staff exchanged glances that spoke of strategies crumbling and assumptions proving worthless. "What would you recommend, warrior?" the admiral asked finally. HFY moved back to the tactical display and called up a new projection showing potential future scenarios based on different council responses to human initiatives. "Establish formal contact with human leadership," he said simply. "Send a delegation to discuss terms for peaceful coexistence and potential cooperation. Humans prefer negotiation to conflict when possible. And if they refuse to negotiate?" "They won't refuse," the transformed Vorthan assured him. "But they will insist on negotiating from a position of strength. The council would need to approach them as equals, not as a superior civilization offering terms to primitives." Dr. Thos watched the admiral struggle with this advice. The concept of treating humans as equals violated every assumption the council had made about their technological and cultural superiority. "There's one more thing you need to understand," HFY said quietly. "The modifications I've received aren't limited to cognitive enhancement. I now have access to human communication networks. I'm in constant contact with their leadership, providing regular updates on council activities and decision-making processes." The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled officers. The security implications were staggering. They had been planning their response to human capabilities while unknowingly providing real-time intelligence to their opponents. "You're a spy," Admiral Korthak said flatly. "I'm a bridge," HFY corrected. "My purpose isn't to betray the council, but to prevent unnecessary conflicts based on misunderstanding. Humans want the council to succeed in its mission of maintaining galactic peace. They simply believe it can be done more effectively with their assistance." As the briefing session continued, Dr. Thos found herself facing a choice that she had never expected to encounter. The evidence was overwhelming that HFY had been genuinely improved by his human contact, not harmed or corrupted. His cognitive abilities, his strategic thinking, even his emotional stability had all been enhanced beyond normal Vorthan parameters. The question that haunted her was whether she was brave enough to accept the same transformation herself. Outside the observation window, the lights of Sanctuary Station continued to twinkle in the darkness of space, representing the best efforts of galactic civilization to maintain peace and cooperation among the stars. But, as she listened to HFY describe the human vision for the galaxy's future, she began to wonder if those lights were about to be extinguished by something far brighter. The age of human influence had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same.